Dear Art, I had to fax when I heard other time travelers calling in from any time past the year 2500 AD. Please let me explain. Time travel was invented in 2034. Offshoots of certain successful fusion reactor research allowed scientists at CERN to produce the world's first contained singularity engine. The basic design involves rotating singularities inside a magnetic field. By altering the speed and direction of rotation, you can travel both forward and backward in time. Time itself can be understood in terms of connected lines. When you go back in time, you travel on your original timeline. When you turn the singularity engine off, a new timeline is created due to the fact that you and your time machine are now there. In other words, a new universe is created. To get back to your original line, you must travel a split second farther back and immediately throw the engine into forward without turning it off. Some interesting outcomes of this are: 1. You meet yourself. I have done it often, even taken a younger version of myself along for a few rides before returning myself to the new timeline and going back to mine. 2. You can alter history in the new universe that you have just created. Most of the time, the changes are subtle. Sometimes I'll notice car models that don't exist or books that come out late. The oldest one was a skyscraper that wasn't built in a near-favorite store of mine in New York. Interestingly, when you travel in time, you must compensate for the orbit of the Earth. Since the time machine doesn't move, you have to adjust the engine so you remain on the planet when you turn it off. Unfortunately, it was also discovered that anyone going forward in time from my 2036 hit a brick wall in the year 2564. Everyone who has ever been there has reported that nothing exists. When the machine is turned off, you find yourself surrounded by blackness and silence. Whew. Now, most time travelers are trying to find out where the line went bad by going into the past, creating a new universe, and proceeding forward to see if the same thing results in 2564. It appears the line went bad around the year 2000. I'm here now, in this time, to test a few theories of mine before going forward. Now, for the future, you might want to know about. 1. Y2K is a disaster. Many people die on the highways when they freeze to death trying to get to warmer weather. 2. The government tries to keep power by instituting martial law, but all of it collapses when their efforts to bring the power back up fail. 3. A power facility in Denver is able to restart itself, but is mobbed by hundreds of thousands of people and destroyed. This convinces most that maybe we shouldn't bring the old system back up. 4. A few years later, communal government system is developed after the Constitution takes a few twists. China retakes Taiwan. Israel wins the largest battle for their life, and Russia is covered in nuclear snow from their collapsed reactors. Art, the reason I'm here now is because I believe a nuclear weapon set off by Iraq in the Middle East war with Israel might have something to do with the damaged timeline. I will test that theory and get back to you. Please pray that we discover the reason why there is no apparent future after 2564. So I couldn't resist. I thought that was quite a good fax. There you have it.
The year was 2036. That's where he apparently came from, John Titor. And when he did, all kinds of things happened. We'll be back in a moment with Oliver Williams, who heads up the website for the time traveler John Titor. The website is johntitor, Titor.com. And Oliver is next on Coast to Coast AM. Oliver Williams, website editor for the time travel story of John Titor. What a story it is. He first saw John Titor's internet postings in the fall of 2002, and after reading many of the sites where John was discussed, it amazed Oliver as how much polarization and confrontation John's posts caused. Here he is, full show tonight, Oliver Williams. Hey, Oliver, how are you?
Hey, George, how are you doing?
Long time, my friend.
Yeah, it's been a little while.
Since then, has John shown up yet?
No, I don't think he showed up yet.
Still gone. Lots of new people, Oliver. Tell us a little bit about John Titor.
John Titor was a person who went on the internet back in November of 2000. And what he did was he went on to various websites and forums talking about time travel and science. And he basically went on and said, I'm a time traveler. If anybody has any questions they want to ask me, go ahead. So for a period of about 3 months to March 2001, he answered all sorts of questions from people about the nature of time, how time travel worked. He posted pictures of his time machine. And he made a series of statements, which a lot of people consider predictions, which at the time nobody really paid any attention to. Abruptly, he left in March of 2001, and nobody has heard from him since. And slowly, as time has gone by, many of the things that he said have come to pass, or a lot of people feel that what he said has come to pass.
When he started posting on the Art Bell website at the time, the furor started, and then all of a sudden, this thing just spread all over the internet, didn't it?
Absolutely. I have my own theory about how that happened or why it happened, because I think it's what got me into it. But he said a couple of things right away. In fact, it was one of the first things he said. He was talking about how his time machine worked, and he said that in the fall of 2001, CERN was going to make an announcement that they expected to be able to create mini black holes in their new collider, which will be coming on soon.
Very soon.
And I'll be darned if a few months after March, that's exactly what CERN did. They came out and made that announcement. I think it was that single event which caused it to catch on. Then people started talking about it, going to the Post, looking more closely at what he said, and that's how it started.
Tonight we're going to talk about some of those things that Titor talked about to see if they have come true, and some of them, of course, are in the future as well. What kind of an individual did he appear to be when he was doing his postings, Oliver? Was he approachable?
Yeah, he seemed friendly enough. He would answer any question that was given to him. I think he was easily kind of annoyed by some of the things he was asked. And I also got the impression after reading that he was a little bit surprised by our society. He harbored some anger and some, discontent towards us. But I think overall, on an individual basis, he seemed like a pretty nice guy. But he definitely had his opinions about, our time and how we lived our life.
Now, he was from the year 2036, but when he came back into our time period, the real John Titor, the little boy John Titor, was around, right? In Florida, I guess.
That's correct. He claims to have been with his family while he was online. He was using his father's computer, and he was staying in the home of his parents at the time. And what he claimed he did was he basically walked up to him and said, "Hi, I'm your son from the year 2036. He said he was able to prove to them beyond a shadow of a doubt who he was. And then he stayed with them for that period of time. And while he was with them, the little version of himself that is in our time was with him. And I think at the time he was 3 years old. So today I think he would be 9 or 10. But yeah, he did claim to have met himself as a younger child.
Now, I didn't think you could do that, or at least that's what I heard on the various Hollywood movies we would look at.
Well, in the, how long has it been? 5, 6 years since I've been following this?
Yeah.
Of course, you can't help but read about time travel and time travel theories, and even that is fascinating as it relates to this. But according to John, you don't really go back in your own time. The concept of time travel is really made up of a series of multiple universes. So what John did was he basically traveled to a multiple universe that looked exactly like his, except it was a little bit farther back in time. So he wasn't in his own past. He was basically in the past in another universe, and that's how you can meet yourself.
Oliver, next hour, toward the end of the hour and before the hour we take phone calls, I'm going to play that clip I've got with Larry Haber, the attorney for Teeter's family. It's an incredible interview where his mother is on the phone. She didn't want to go on the air, and so questions are being relayed back and forth to her, and Larry answers it. And I found the attorney, as I found you, to be impeccable, and you all appear to be honest.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I remember listening to that too, and it's actually kind of frustrating because, I'd love to talk to her, and I'd love to have an in-depth interview with Larry, but they're both very difficult people to get a hold of.
Yeah, absolutely. Larry did this as a favor to the show. He had apparently heard so much about what we were doing on Teeter, and he said, all right, I'll talk. Just an amazing situation. Now, let's go back a little bit on the motivation of Teeter. Why did he come back here?
If you had asked me that question 4 years ago, I probably would have had a different answer. But I have,
and I probably did.
One of the things I noticed, every day, well, not every day, but every other day, I'll sit down and I'll do a little Google search. I'll look up black holes. I'll look up time travel, and that's how I kind of relate it to what's going on with Teeter. What I've noticed is if you start looking up things, for example, CERN. If you look up CERN and black holes, John Teeter is in the top 10. If you look up converting methane to hydrogen as a new fuel, John Teeter's in the top 10.
That is incredible.
If you look up the IBM 5100, John Teeter's in the top 10. So I'm beginning to wonder now if he knew that this was going to happen and that he's actually trying to get some information out there to somebody who he knows is going to be exposed to this because of where it is on the Internet. That's what I think is going on now.
Well, that's a good point. He apparently, at least when we talked a long time ago, needed to get some computer parts from one of those 5100 IBMs?
Correct. The reason that John said he was here was that he was a soldier in an Army unit in 2036, and his mission was to go back in time, or to another alternate universe in the year 1975, and obtain one of the world's first personal computers. It was manufactured by IBM. It's called the 5100. And, according to him, he completed his mission and he got it. And he even talked about it while he was here. And one of the interesting things that he said about it was that he claimed that there was a thing that this computer did which was not published by IBM and that nobody knew about it, or very few people, maybe 5 people knew about it. And it was the ability for this computer to translate from various old IBM languages. So you could basically set this thing on a desktop, connect it up to a mainframe, and you were able to fix it or reprogram it. And he said that the reason IBM kept this information to themselves was because it would have destroyed a huge section of their infrastructure. They wouldn't be able to charge people to go out and do this, so they didn't want them buying this computer so they could do it themselves. Now, at the time, again, nobody paid much attention to that. After he left, a couple of IBM engineers came forward and said, you know what, I don't know who that guy was, but he's absolutely right. And I actually interviewed one of these guys in Rochester, Minnesota, and he said there's probably only 20 people on the planet that knew that. So that is another one of those twists that adds a little more to the story.
Yeah, Teeter was either a genius who's still around somewhere, or this guy had the ability to travel in time, because other than some dates that might be off, we'll talk about that in a moment, he was pretty uncanny. Now, he also could be throwing little curveballs at people. Isn't that true?
Yeah, I've often thought that myself, is that he may be a time traveler, but he also might be a liar. So he may be just giving us enough information to do whatever it is he wants done, and then he's feeding us some things that aren't true for whatever reason.
He could be a disinformation guy.
Correct.
Now, wouldn't that be interesting, that the government sends, when talk about conspiracies, Oliver, they send disinformation people back from time to screw us up even more.
Yeah, I don't even know how you would fight that.
You couldn't. You couldn't. And then he abruptly disappeared.
Correct.
How did he end up leaving? What happened?
He basically said, the window for me to leave is coming up. I think he said a couple of weeks before he left. And he said, I've got to be going back soon, so this is my opportunity to do it. So when I do, I'm saying goodbye. And abruptly on that day, he was gone. Nobody ever heard from him again. So it's assumed that he went back to where he came from.
There is a picture of the time traveler's time travel machine on your website, on Teeter's website, I guess. on Teeter's website, I guess, johnteeter.com. Describe, if you would, describe what it looks like.
Sure. He actually posted a whole series of pictures. Some of them were photographs that he claimed to have taken himself. But the one that he posted, which has got people buzzing all the time, it's a cutaway that he claims was from the operations manual of the time machine. And it basically looks like a box, a large suitcase, and you can look inside and you can see all the mechanisms of the time machine. And for a long time, people were trying to figure out what this was. It's obviously a picture of some machine. And a lot of people spent a lot of hours trying to track this thing down and figure out what it was. Some people think it was some sort of a radio, an Army radio set, or some sort of a biological or nuclear detection system. But nobody has been able to come forward with that picture or a picture like it that would prove beyond the shadow of a doubt that's what it is. So apparently, according to John, that's a picture of his time machine.
And nobody's been able to duplicate it by looking at it, I guess.
Correct. Nobody's been able to look at it or build it. But it's a pretty detailed, schematic of exactly what he was talking about, how his time machine works.
Was he very elaborate in his postings?
He had limits. He said this a couple of times. He says, I can answer your questions about how the machine works. I can give you the physics. But, I'm not a scientist. So I can't give you absolute details. I guess what he referred to, I remember him saying once, if you were to approach a pilot of an airplane, it's unlikely that they're also aerospace engineers. So he said that he knew a lot about how it worked, but if there were certain details that were too technical, he wasn't able to answer them.
Oliver, because, you've never been able to find the family, and we've only talked to Larry Haber, the attorney who knows where the family is. Apparently they moved to Nebraska?
Correct. They lived in Florida for a period of time, and then after John left, they moved to Nebraska. And the only significant thing I can think of there is that Nebraska, according to John in the future, is the new capital of the United States. So I'm guessing there's a connection. Either it's safe there or they're expecting something to be better there, but they moved away from Florida. This is actually right before the hurricane season, too, if you recall.
Oh, that's a good point.
So right before the hurricanes hit Florida, they were gone.
What did he say about the year 2036?
Again, John describes his future, which is not our future. In other words, he made the point that if he were to get into his time machine here and go forward, it would not look like his future because this is a different universe. It would be similar, but it wouldn't be exactly the same. He described his future basically recovering from Y2K, which did hit his future.
Now, do you think he might have been in a parallel universe?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, based on how he described time travel works, he was from a parallel universe that looked pretty much like ours did, except in his, Y2K happened. As a result, there was a civil war in the United States. It started in 2005 and ended in 2010. And then there was a world war that began in 2011 and ended in 2015. In 2015, this global war involved a nuclear exchange, and the United States, along with Europe, China, Russia, all the other major powers, were all involved. And he said that the U.S. government basically came to an end as we know it right now. It became much more fragmented, and the United States divided up into 5 main areas that were composed of the states in that area. He said the flag of the United States changed. Instead of 50 stars, it had 5 stars. Jeez. Instead of a single president, we have 5 presidents, and they are rotated out on an alternate basis. So you always have, he said that the reason they did that was that they could have a consistent foreign policy. Instead of having one guy leave, if you had 2 or 3 guys in there that were the same, then your foreign policy was more consistent.
Were they still voted for?
Yes, absolutely. He said they were still voted for. In fact, he still described the United States as a representative republic.
Still strong militarily?
Yeah, I would assume if there's an army unit that could send people back in time, I would probably assume that we probably still had a military.
So even though it broke up into sections, it still stayed strong?
Absolutely.
Okay.
He said that the capital had moved to Nebraska, but then he goes on to say that the states had much more control over daily life than this large central government. So things became much more decentralized. He described the average day in 2036 as being like a day on the farm. You know, you were very close to your family. You didn't live very far away from them. You know, religion became a very personal thing. There was no more organized, huge religion. You relied more on your family and your friends that were with you. In fact, he said a story once, and while he was here, he said that he related what it's like in the future to when the power goes out now. He says, you know, when the power goes out for a couple of hours, people start to leave their homes, and they go out in the road, and they start talking to their neighbors. I don't know if you've ever had that happen before, but I have.
Yeah, that's happened.
And he said that's exactly what it's like living in 2036, except it's like that all the time. You don't have this disconnection from the people that are around you. You feel that connection all the time because of what happened. Of course, he said the major cities were destroyed in the war. However, the development of technology continued. He said that there was mandatory civil service, either in the Army or in a Peace Corps-like service. He said that people, and this was interesting too, and this is, keep in mind, George, he said this back in 2000, 2001. He said people make and distribute their own videos on the Internet.
And this was pre-9/11, right?
This is pre-9/11. This is pre-YouTube. He said that the entertainment industry has become much more focused on the Internet, and people make and distribute their own entertainment and video on the Internet.
That's amazing.
He said there were no large, huge stores that distributed, you know, tons and tons of products anymore. In fact, he also told a story when he was here with his parents when he walked into, I think it was a Walmart or something, and he said he, you know, physically became ill when he walked into this huge store and saw all these gallons of milk, you know, all these rows of plastic toys, you know, all these things that he had never seen in the future in one place. He saw in his trolley, so it completely overwhelmed him. He also said that it's hard to have children in the future, that being able to have children is a very, I won't use the word special, but he said that because of a lot of problems in the future, that it's very difficult to have kids, and that was something that was much different than it is now.
Did you need approval for kids?
I don't think you need approval so much as that physically, I guess as a result of the war or disease or whatever, that having children was much rarer than it is now. So they were much more revered, and it was much more of an important thing to be able to have kids.
Did he talk about all over the world population?
Yes. According to him, the population of the world was basically cut by a third as a result of war, disease, famine, all these things that happened, you know, during the World War. So, in fact, I remember him saying, I just reviewed this today, as a matter of fact, I think he said there was about 100 million less people in the United States than there are now.
Why do you think people are still enamored with the life of John Titor?
I think, you know, it's the same experience I had, George, which was when I first read it, I thought it was interesting. I thought it was something that was kind of, you know, neat online. And then you start seeing things that are happening in the news, and you start thinking back to yourself, wait a minute, I remember some guy on the Internet was talking about that. So you go back and you reread it, and you go, I'll be darned, that's exactly what's happening. And I'm seeing that happening to a lot of people on the Internet now. You know, I'll put a Google alert for blogs when the name John Titor pops up, and I'll get about 20 of them a day. And it's exactly the same experience I had, is that they'll read something in the news, even if they'd never heard about it, they heard about it from their friends, and then they'll go back and read it, and it's the same feeling. It's this fascination of, how did that guy know that? You know, and they start trying to put it together, and once you have that feeling, you're hooked.
Why did Titor come back to our time period? Or maybe he's come back to many.
You know, my idea about that has changed also, and I'll tell you what I think.
And what did you think originally?
Well, you know, at first I wasn't sure. I thought he definitely gave this air that he was trying to change something, but you really didn't know what it was. You know, because you ask yourself, if you were a time traveler and you came here for whatever reason, why would you go on the Internet and start talking about it?
Right.
But back then, you know, the Internet was, I don't know how to put it, safer. You know, you could hide your identity. It was easier to move around. There weren't as many people on there as there are now. My belief is that John went to 1975, and he inadvertently did something that he regretted.
Let's talk about that when we come back. Oliver Williams, our special guest, as we talk about time traveler John Titor. I'm George Norrie. This is Coast to Coast AM. Tonight, the time-traveled story of John Titor. We've got Oliver Williams, webmaster for JohnTitor.com. talk about what happened back in 75. But, Oliver, why did you decide to be the webmaster of this website and put all this together?
Basically, George, it happened completely by accident. Once I found out about this from a friend of mine, I had to go to like 6 or 7 different sites to see all of the posts that he had left. He had done this in numerous areas. So what I basically did was I grabbed the posts and I edited them, and then I posted them online myself, just as a reference for here are all the posts if you want to look at them in one spot. Now, since then, a lot of other sites have done that too. But I've also tried to put news stories that are happening now on the site so that people can go and relate what he said to what's happening in the news. And I think that's probably the reason why the site has been as popular as it has.
Does it take up much time for you?
It doesn't, but here's the odd phenomenon, which is I'll sit for a while and I won't pay any attention to it for a couple of months because nothing's happening in the news.
Right.
But, and hopefully we can talk about this later, there are like 6 or 7 things, George, that happened in the last few weeks that just boom, 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 and I'm right on top of them. I get it. You got to be kidding me. It's like riding a wave. You're up and you're down, and in the last few weeks we've been up again.
Yeah, hugely. All right, 1975, we were talking about that, why he went back to that era.
All right, first of all, everything I'm about to tell you is my own theory. And this is not something John said, but this is what I think might be possible if John is a time traveler. I think, George, we are living on a timeline or a multiple reality, whatever you want to call it, that was altered by a time traveler in 1975. And I'll tell you how I mean.
All right.
He goes back to 1975. He interacts with people at IBM to obtain this computer. And I believe that he did something by accident that he regrets in 1975, either that had to do with his family, had to do with the computer, or had to do with something. Now, the speculation that a lot of people have, and I kind of agree with this, and as ridiculous as this sounds, stay with me, John did something in 1975 which stopped Y2K for us. Now, when you hear that now, you go, oh, that's ridiculous. But think back to 1999, when everybody was ready. Everybody thought it was going to happen, and it didn't happen.
Right.
In addition to that, John made reference to that a couple of times. In fact, he even said a couple of stories. He said, imagine you could go back to World War II at Pearl Harbor, and you could warn the radar operator that those blips that they're seeing are actually Japanese planes.
Exactly.
Would you say something to them? And, of course, everybody goes, oh, of course I would. I'd want to stop the war, da-da. But then you think about it. If you were to do that, imagine the United States doesn't get into World War II. Imagine that Hitler goes on to dominate Europe, invents the atomic bomb, and then takes over the world because we didn't get involved.
There could be consequences.
I believe that was the type of weight that might have been on John in 1975. I now believe that John traveled from 1975 to 1998. And when he was there, he was paying attention to what was going on, and he sent 2 faxes to Art Bell, which Art read on the air. In those faxes, he basically describes how his time machine works. He talks about CERN. He also says that there's a skyscraper missing from New York.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, at the time, nobody paid any attention to this. They thought it was ridiculous. But that was the last we heard of John. Then he suddenly shows up in 2000 and starts leaving his posts online. So I think whatever he was doing, he was trying to fix something or trying to correct something that he did in 1975. The only other clue that I have is that if Y2K didn't happen for us, and maybe we don't have a civil war, maybe there's no world war.
Because he did say it would be 2005 for the Civil War, right?
And again, a lot of people look at that and go, he's crazy, that didn't happen, so he's obviously a liar. He said the conflict would start in 2005, but the shooting wouldn't begin until 2008. So, you kind of look at that both ways. Either he was wrong, he's changed it, so it's different. There's lots of outs for that. But my guess is that John thought the war would be good for us because it would lead to the type of society that I just told you about that he came from. So I'm wondering if that wasn't what he was trying to do. In other words, he saw that he did something which in the long run was going to be bad for us, and he was trying to correct that.
Do you think he might come back?
Based on how he described time travel works, I don't think that's possible. In other words, I don't think we're going to see exactly the same John come back and visit us. So, no, I don't think we're ever going to see that John again.
Try to imagine what he's doing right now, Oliver.
Yeah, he's back in 2036. So, I don't know. He talked about continuing to do other missions, but he said his specialization was going back to the 70s. And he also said that because of the type of mission that he was on, he was related to the people that he was interacting with.
Did he have a family in 2036?
Yes, he said his father was still alive, I believe. And I don't think he talked about his mother much, but he did live with his family. His mother and father were still alive in 2036.
What about time? What about travel, space travel? Did he get into that?
He did. He said that, of course, in his world line, they were more preoccupied with the war and survival, and space travel took a break, but he did say that they were trying to do it again. As a matter of fact, I remember him saying, I think he said something about being able to use this technology to travel in space, but he said that if you used it in space, you would basically be traveling between realities or multiple universes in space also. So yes, you could travel to the moon in record time, but you'd have to travel into another universe that looked just like yours, maybe a second or so ahead. So it wouldn't be the same, but in effect, from the perspective of the traveler, they would be traveling great distances.
Let's get into some of the specifics on his elaboration of how time travel works.
Absolutely. All right, John basically said that time, and I'll talk about how he said time travel works, and I can talk about the machine later.
Okay.
He said, imagine the last time you were at the barber shop, and there are two mirrors on each side of you. And you look one way, and you see all these reflections of yourself going in one direction, and you see all these reflections going in the other direction. He said, basically, that's what it's like to travel in time, is that you have the ability to step out of the room that you're in into the next room where you see your reflection next to you. But while that's happening, all of the reflections of you are also stepping into the next room. So if you were to travel 5 minutes back in time, chances are the version of you that's there now is also a time traveler, and they're going to travel 5 minutes into the past. So you wouldn't meet yourself doing that. And the new universe that you're in would look pretty much like the one that you just left. You with me so far?
So far.
Okay. Taking that to the extreme, the machine John had would allow him to travel farther back. He said the limit on his was 60 years, and he said that at that point the machine starts to break away. And what he meant by that was, if you travel more than 60 years at a time, the alternate universe that you're going to starts to look radically different from what you would expect. So if you were to go back, say, 1,000 years, then the Romans may not have fallen. Or if you were to go back 100 years, maybe the England wouldn't have colonized the United States. So it's a 60-year limit where you can make jumps where it looks pretty much like where you left. At a certain point, you're going to meet yourself because you're young. You're not a time traveler yet. So there's a certain point where when you step into that next room, the version of you that's there is doing something different. That's how he described how time travel works. Now, interestingly enough, John was one of the first people I ever heard say that when you travel like that, you can never get back to the exact place that you left. He said that once you start traveling with the machine, as soon as you turn the machine off, you've basically created another universe, and it's different because you're there, even for that split second. So if you were to try to go back to where you started, you couldn't do it. You could get close, but you couldn't get exactly to the point where you left. The reason I find that interesting is because if you think back, do you remember the time you were interviewing Roger, was it Mallard?
Yeah, Eugene Mallard? Mallard?
Yeah, he...
no. Dr. Mallard.
Ronald Mallard.
Ronald Mallard, the physicist, who wanted to go back to see his father.
Yes, I remember hearing that interview, and he actually said that. He said, well, the one thing about time travel is that you can never get back to exactly where you started. And I was like, whoa, where have I heard that before?
Yep.
And if you start going back now to some of these scientists that are taking time travel seriously, that is one of their fundamental things now. I don't remember ever hearing anybody say that until John said it 6 years ago.
No, John Titor, whoever he might have been, understood physics. and he understood physics in a good way. I'm going to read the first facts that Art got from John Titor, the one in 1998 that you just made reference to, Oliver, supplied to me by Bad Boy from the NighthawkZone.com, NighthawkZone.com. Here it is. Let me read it to you. This is, Dear Art, I had the facts when I heard other time travelers calling in from any time past, the year 2500 AD. Please let me explain. Time travel was invented in 2034. Offshoots of certain successful fusion reactor research allowed scientists at CERN to produce the world's first contained singularity engine. The basic design involves rotating singularities inside a magnetic field by altering the speed and the direction. Let me get down to some of the other things. You can alter history in the new universe that you've just created. Most of the time, the changes are subtle. The oldest one was a skyscraper that doesn't exist in New York. Now, this was 1998. That's incredible.
Doesn't that send a chill up your back?
It really does. Interestingly, when you travel in time, you must compensate for the orbit of the Earth. Since the time machine doesn't move, you have to adjust the engine so you remain on the planet when you turn it off. Now, for the future, you might want to know about Y2K. It's a disaster. Many people die on the highways when they freeze to death trying to get to warmer weather. The governor tries to keep power by instituting martial law, but all of it collapses when their efforts to bring the power back up fail. A few years later, communal government systems are developed after the Constitution takes a few twists. China retakes Taiwan. Israel wins the largest battle for its life. Russia is covered in nuclear snow from their collapsed reactors. All right, I wanted to read you something as I received it, and that's from the Time Traveler, according to Art. Now, that's uncanny, Oliver.
And it sounds very much like our John, also in 2000.
Yes.
So, but if you notice, it seems a little harsher. It seems a little more desperate. It's not exactly the same John, but it sounds, the elements of what he said in 2000 are the same. So I kind of find that fascinating, too, that, was that a different John? Was that a John that went forward and came back and told us what was going on? Those are some of the issues that are kind of interesting to think about.
Did John say anything about our time period? I mean, did he say he was enlightened by it? He enjoyed it? Did he have fun in it?
I think John was absolutely overwhelmed being in our society. I think he was disappointed that we were addicted to machines and things. I think he saw us as wasting our opportunity to read, travel, and educate ourselves. I also think that he partially blamed us for a lot of the misery that occurred in his future. And at one point, he even calls us lazy, self-centered, ignorant sheep. And he was constantly telling us to wake up, that look around you, that, things are not what they seem. The other thing, he also expressed an incredible amount of concern for the fact that we were letting our Constitution be taken away from us. He was constantly talking about how he was afraid to eat. He didn't know it was in our air and in our water. And again, he said that he felt that war for us would be good. He thought that based on everything he'd seen and experienced, that we needed a good shaking up, and that's what we deserved.
A remarkable story, Oliver. Now, you mentioned 6 or 7 things that have occurred almost in succession here. Bang, 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 bang. Let's talk about that.
All right, I went through, and I've got a top 10 list here of the things that I think, really hit home. And then I've got another list here, the last 4 things that have happened in the last month. I'll start with the ones that have happened since he started posting. It's important to remember, and you brought this up too, George, that what he did was before 9/11. It was before the War on Terror. It was before the space shuttle accidents. What he was talking about happened way before that. The very first thing he said, which got everybody's attention, was that CERN was going to announce they expected to be able to create mini black holes in their collider, and that was in the fall of 2001. Next, he told us about the IBM 5100. That was later confirmed by IBM engineers. He makes a reference to skyscraper that's missing in New York. He told us our Constitution would be eroded away from us in the future. He said there would be no weapons of mass destruction found in Iraq before 9/11, before we would even go to war with Iraq. He said China would be the next country to put a man in space. He said multiple times we were going to have trouble with our space shuttle. He said mad cow disease would be discovered in the U.S., it would get worse, and it would be a major problem in the future. He said Stephen Hawking was going to change his opinion about some of his physics on black holes.
And he did.
He did. He said virus cells were going to be used to fight cancer. And he also made reference to a female president in the year 2009.
That's amazing, all that. So John Titor is predicting Hillary Clinton, I take it.
Yeah, he didn't exactly say she was going to win. My take on what he said was that she's definitely in the mix.
Well, I got to tell you, as we look at this pendulum here between Obama and Clinton, it's absolutely incredible. I mean, the momentum is now swinging back in her favor. This is truly incredible, the way this is going.
George, don't you think that whole situation is nothing but a powder keg?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where to go with that, except to say that I don't see how that's going to end peacefully.
Meanwhile, McCain just keeps creeping along, and he's ahead now. If he had to run against either candidate, he'd beat them, according to the latest polls. So, did Titor talk about extraterrestrial visitation or anything like that?
He made one remark about it. He said, somebody asked him about UFOs. And he said, I don't know exactly what they are. My guess is that they are other time travelers like myself with more sophisticated time travel machines. That's what he thought they were.
Let's talk a little bit more then about the machine itself.
Sure.
And how big was it?
All right, the machine, he talked about different versions of the machine. He said that he had, it's called the C206, and it was built by General Electric. He also made reference to another machine called his was the C204, but he made reference to another one called the C206. He basically said it's a box about the size of a large suitcase, and it's very heavy, and it basically operates by using two mini black holes, which are electrified and rotated to create a gravitational field around the box and around the user. And when you manipulate this field, it allows you to travel between these dimensions. He says that it had a system of ejecting electrons onto the black hole, which either increased the spin or the mass slightly or did something that allowed you to control them. He said there were a series of cesium clocks that checked the timing on the black holes, and that's what they used to navigate by the second, going backwards and forwards in time. He also said there was a system called VGL, which stood for Variable Gravity Lock. And he said what this system did was it basically sampled the gravity before you used the machine, and then it sort of kept you in that position while you were traveling in time. And this is how you avoid flying off the Earth while you're using the machine. So it purposely keeps you attached to whatever large gravitational mass you're next to when you're using the machine.
All right, we're going to be back in just a moment, Oliver. We'll talk a little bit more about the machine. Oliver Williams, webmaster for JohnTitor.com. And I'll tell you what we'll do next hour. I'm going to open up one phone line in the event John Titor is out there somewhere. John, I want you to check in with us. Oliver, your role will be, as we continue our discussion, is to ascertain whether that's John Titor or not, or a fraud. That phone number for you, John Titor, is 818-817-0021. Please, just John Titor, call 818-817-0021. Okay, and our guest, Oliver Williams. Next hour, we'll take all your phone calls, but this hour, while I'm chatting with Oliver about the incredible story of the time travel tale of John Titor, if John is out there, please, John, call this number, 818-817-0021. Maybe you're still there and you just have decided not to post anymore. We don't know. And Oliver will, of course, chat with you, and if for some reason Oliver believes you're not John Titor, he'll just tell us. And no one's feelings are hurt. 818-817-0021, only if you're John Titor. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie with Oliver Williams. We're going to keep the John Titor line open just in case. You never know. Oliver, I take it you have a pretty good sense if that would be Titor or not, would you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's go back a little bit as we were discussing the possibilities with John Titor and why he did what he did. Do you think he was being a good guy about all this, or as we talked about the possibility of a, disinformation specialist?
Well, if he was a disinformation specialist, I'm not sure, how much damage he could have done except maybe confusing some people. But I felt like he thought he knew better. And he was a little arrogant, and he was a little disappointed with us. It's almost like a father scolding a child. And it was like, you don't know what's good for you, so I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing. But what I'm doing in the long run is going to be good for you, but it's going to be painful. And that was sort of the attitude that I think he had.
Let's go to the hotline as someone purporting to be John Teeter is on the line. Hi there.
How's it going?
Good. Very good. So you are John Teeter?
My name is John Teeter.
Well, it could be John Teeter. I don't know if he's the time traveler or not, but Oliver, ask him a few questions and let's figure it out.
Oh, sure. Okay, tell me what your father did in 2036 after the war to make money.
He smoked crack and sold extras.
No, that's not John.
That's not John. He's out. And we're going to get a lot of those.
Oh, I know. I get a lot of them in my email.
Oh, do you?
Oh, absolutely. George, I think we talked about this last time, too. I get at least 10 death threats every week.
What?
And it's stuff in huge capital letters. You know those kind of emails?
Yeah.
And every word is an expletive. For some reason, there's a portion of the population, this story just ticks the heck out of them.
Do you try to track them down?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean...
You don't do that, huh?
There
are ways,
Well, actually,
now.
The agreement I have with my family is I try not to get too involved on a personal level because I know for a fact, looking at the posts, Larry has gone through this himself. He's had people track his kids down, take pictures of them at their school, post it online, post how to get to his office, how to get to his house. I mean, Larry has taken a lot of abuse over this story, and I'm definitely not looking forward to any of that.
Who would be doing this?
I as I said, there's a group of people, a small percentage of the people that read this, and for some reason, what John said makes them very angry. They want to track the person down who's responsible for this, tar and feather them, drag it through the streets, and I don't know why they feel that way, but they do.
Man, it really does get them that upset.
Yeah.
Earth catastrophes, what did he say?
John had 3 rules when he was talking about what he would answer. He said he's not going to answer any questions that would allow you to make money. So he's not going to give you any stock tips or tell you how to do that. He said he was not going to allow you, or he wasn't going to answer any questions that would allow somebody to avoid death by probability. So in other words, he would not answer any questions about where there would be an earthquake or a volcano or a hurricane. He refused to do that. And the third one was he would not answer specific questions about names. Like you say, who is the president in 2009? He would not tell you the name because then you would have the opportunity to alter that person's life and then change things. So those were his 3 rules. So as a result of that, he never gave any specific information about natural disasters.
He also didn't talk much about like sporting events or gambling things. He didn't try to profit off this.
No, as a matter of fact, that was one question that really made him mad, was that, here you are, this opportunity to talk to a time traveler about religion, philosophy, physics, and all you want to know is what stock should I buy because I'm greedy and I want to make money and take advantage of you and screw other people. That's the question I have for you, Mr. Time Traveler. And that really made him upset.
Do you remember the story of another time traveler who apparently took $500, came back into time, made a killing on Wall Street? They put him in jail, and one day he was just gone.
I do remember that. That was like 3 years ago.
Yeah, it was an incredible story, and I don't know what happened to him.
Well, if you've got the ability to travel around in time, George, seriously, is that what you'd be concerned about?
No.
Okay.
Absolutely not. Honestly, if I could go back into time, Oliver, I would like to go back into the biblical period to try to witness this, because to me, that's probably one of the greatest stories of mankind. And I'd like to see that. I might even want to go back to the Sumerian days to see if truly we had visitors, the Anunnaki, from a planet X.
Well, George, since you bring that up, let me throw this at you. Let's say you do go back 2,000 years in time, and you inadvertently do something which changes what happens 2,000 years ago. How would you feel? Would you feel guilty about that?
Maybe I'd pull him down off the cross.
Yeah. And again, that goes back to
I don't
you
think
know,
he'd let me, though.
what are our responsibilities is if we could travel in time, what exactly are our responsibilities on that?
It would be so difficult not to try to get involved.
Well, you know, the other thing John said about time travel is that if you were to do something like that, you have to stay in that reality in order to experience the results. So you couldn't go back in time and kill Hitler and then go forward in time to see how things go.
Right.
So if you think about that, how does that affect morality? In other words, you could do all sorts of things, or there are other versions of you doing all sorts of evil things out there. You know, there's a good George and there's a bad George. So if you believe in God, how does God judge us in totality if there's an infinite number of Georges out there doing evil things and an infinite number of Georges out there doing good things?
Let's go to another John Teeter call. Hello there.
Hello.
Yeah.
I'm John. Yes, sir.
Welcome
I'm
to
in
the show.
Dallas, Oregon.
Go ahead, Oliver, because you know John Teeter better than I.
John, tell us what your favorite food is.
Hold on.
Hello?
I think he's looking it up.
No, we've lost another one. But he sounded like he was trying to alter his voice. Yeah, he's gone. But you're here, Oliver, aren't you?
I'm still here.
Okay, yeah, he's gone. So it sounded like he was trying to alter his voice. John Teeter. He's gone now, Oliver.
Okay, I'm here.
I got rid of him. So he's off and away. Anyways, back to some of the things. Mad cow disease, you touched on that. We really haven't had a huge problem with that yet.
Well, you know, you're right. He said that it wasn't going to hit until the year 2034, 35. That's when people were going to start dropping. And, you know, I didn't pay much attention to that until I went back and started reading on, you know, how long the gestation period is for mad cow. But since you brought that up, this is actually one of the things that got me started on the roller coaster for the last couple of months. There was a story, and this ended up on my radar, and I put it in the back of my head. I'm going, nah, that can't be right. Do you recall there was a huge beef recall not too long ago?
Yes, huge, the biggest ever.
Right, and they said, and they didn't say why, and I went and looked it up, and apparently they're afraid that for the last year, there might have been some bad beef that got into the population, and they fed it to our kids.
Well, because there are a lot of the cattle and cows that they used were stumbling, which is a sign of the possibility of mad cow and the way they were killing them.
Absolutely,
and you're right; it's already in the food system.
Yeah, and they sent it to schools. The other thing, when I started looking this up, is somebody, you know, there's a huge article, and you can find it on my website. Basically, their policy is don't ask, don't test. That, you know, the FDA is becoming incredibly lax in catching this, and they just sort of look the other way when these cows are going through. And John said this is going to be a gigantic problem in our future.
You know, we've talked about the possibility that John Teeter might be out there calling in. Do you think that is possible, or do you think he is gone?
You know, I think the John that was here is gone. If John is here, it's going to be a different John based on how he described time travel worked. So, you know, if he's a real time traveler, he had a mission to complete. He got the computer, he needed to do what he was doing here, and he left.
Did he talk about other time travelers being here also at the same time?
No. He did say there are 7 other time travelers in his unit, and they were out doing different things. He said that the real use in a time machine is not so much going back and altering the history or even looking at what's going on. It's getting things, because you can physically get something and bring it back with you. He says that's the real value in time travel. And that's what he was doing. He went back to get that old computer. And, you know, I'll bring this up, too. A lot of people write in and they say, that's ridiculous. If you had the ability to travel in time, why would you have to go back and get an old computer for the future? And I found an article, and this is, again, on our website. NASA routinely goes to eBay looking for old computer parts because they're no longer manufactured to keep the space shuttle running. So there is precedent for doing that. I mean, NASA's doing it right now. So it's not a ridiculous idea that you'd have to go back to get old technology.
You know, Oliver, did he ever get scared of anything?
You know, he was terrified of eating food here. That was the one thing he said over and over again. He didn't know where the food came from. He couldn't believe that we would walk into a fast food restaurant. He didn't know where the food came from. He couldn't believe that we would walk into a fast food restaurant He couldn't believe that we would walk into a fast food restaurant and order food that you couldn't see prepared, that you didn't know you grew yourself. He mentioned that multiple times, and that absolutely scared the heck out of him. He was also apparently very sensitive to the air. He, I guess, had a good sense of smell, and he felt the same way about water. He boiled it. He wanted to make sure he knew where it was coming from. So my take on that is, in the future, I guess that's a big problem. But he was terrified of the food and the water here.
Did he talk about the cars or the fuel system of the future?
Yes, he made, in fact, this is something I've been keeping up on, and I think, in fact, I heard your guest mention it when I was listening to the show earlier tonight. He said that there is a huge industry in converting propane into hydrogen.
Right.
Or is it vice versa? He said that is a huge, huge industry in the future. And I've been trying to follow that. I look it up every now and then, and I'll see maybe one or two references to it on the Internet, and it's slowly starting to grow. And then I heard your guest mention it tonight. So I think anybody paying attention to this might want to watch that, because I think that's going to be the next big thing in the future. He said that there are high-speed trains that connect, the cities and the communities. There are cars. There are just not a whole lot of them. And people ride more bikes and they ride horses. That's what he said.
Did he talk about industry? Did people work? How did they make money? Was there money?
Yeah, yes, there was money. And there was industry. There was manufacturing, but not nearly on the scale that we see today. It was more centralized in various areas. Like, this city produced cars. This city made computers. So if you wanted to do that, you went to that city to do it. So there was more specialization in a community, but there wasn't nearly the manufacturing capacity that we have now.
All right, let's try another John Teeter line here. So far we've had two frauds. Go ahead, you're on the air with us. Hi there.
Hey, how you doing?
We're doing fine. Go ahead, Oliver. Let's test him.
All right. Tell me where you lived in Florida during the World War.
Where did I live in Florida?
Yep.
Fort Lord?
Another fraud. We're 0 for 3.
You know what's amazing to me is, why do they call in?
They're having fun. They're trying to stump you, Oliver. But see, they probably thought I would be asking the questions. You're the one who knows all about John Teeter, so you're the one who's going to find out if they are real or not, and they are not. But do you actually think, in the future, time travel will be possible? Because there's a mixed court out there.
You know what, George? 5 years ago, I would have said this is science fiction. After reading all this about John Teeter, and now today, just take a look at the science that backs up what he said. In the last 5 years, I'll give you an example. When he was talking about multiple realities, he said the Everett Wheeler model of the universe is correct. And they were the first guys, I believe, that came up with the idea of multiple realities. Well, fast forward 4 years, and now Michio Kaku and other scientists are saying, look, multiple realities has to be real in order for all these other things to be right. So now that's becoming an accepted part of science. Real scientists are talking about, yes, multiple realities do exist. About 6 months ago, a group of scientists came forward and said, if you were going to time travel, you would need a donut-shaped black hole. Well, I challenge you, go look up what John said about time travel and how it works, and he mentions that exact thing. He says the black holes create a donut-shaped gravity field, and that's how you travel in time. Just recently, scientists like John Kramer and Ronald Mallett are now getting real money from the government to actually pursue how to make time machines. I know Ronald Mallett is busy doing it now, and he has a series of rotating light beams, and he expects to be able to inject a small particle into it and actually test if this theory works. So there is money being spent on building these machines.
I think if anybody gets close, it will be Mallett.
Oh, I agree.
He's very good at this.
And last but not least, George, and this is one of the big things that's been happening recently, 2 Russian scientists have come forward and with a paper basically saying as soon as CERN turns on their collider in May, that is going to be the starting point for time travel, and that they expect that what they're doing there will lead to that technology.
Did John Teeter talk about, because he talked about CERN way before we even knew about it, did he talk about CERN in the future that something goes wrong?
No, he didn't say anything goes wrong. He said that is the starting point for time travel. It is discoveries they make at CERN that lead to the creation or the ability to capture these mini black holes. Now, here's something else interesting, too, and you can go to my website and check this out. And I found this just a couple of weeks ago. There is a scientist, a physicist at CERN that did a special, I think, with PBS and Nova. And it's on the Internet, and you can see the whole thing. And it's basically Ask the Physicist. And there are questions on there that sound a lot like somebody knew the John Titor story when they're asking them. He said, tell me, these things going on at CERN, will it lead to proof that multiple realities exist? Will it lead to the beginning of time travel? You know what his answer was?
What?
We don't know. Yes, that's a possibility. Now, George, that is not science fiction. That is what physicists at CERN are saying. So, I'm not the judge of whether or not this is real. They're the ones that are saying it's a possibility.
Well, next half hour, we're going to hear from Larry Haber, the attorney for the family. I had thought there was going to be some kind of movie made about John Titor. There was something small. Anything out there?
I haven't heard. I've been trying to keep track of that. There is a group of people out there that are apparently putting a film together, and they're releasing bits and pieces of it on the Internet. I don't know what the progress with that has been, but I'm looking forward to seeing that, too.
Well, I had thought for a moment that the family was going to try to make a bundle on this, or that John Titor was a well-thought-out, multi-year hoax for something. I don't believe that anymore.
Well, I'm not sure I believe that either. I mean, if you were going to do that, you would have done it a long time ago.
Yeah, they would.
I'm thinking that if it's true, if the family's involved, if Larry's involved, if they're doing something, it may not be for what we think it is. Does that make any sense? It may be they're trying to do something else, get another message out, leave a footprint on the Internet, and that's all they're trying to do.
That could be. Tell me a little bit about the John Titor website.
Sure. We just updated it. Of course, we've got all the news that we just talked about. I do a little podcast. I've been trying to keep up with it. So if you want to hear me yapping about latest things going on with John Titor, you can go there and find out. And if you look up John Titor on YouTube, you can see some videos I left there myself, and, of course, a whole ton of stuff other people are doing.
What do you think he looks like?
That's a good question. I think, and this is something he posted, I think he's a white male. I think he's in his late 30s. I think his hair is short. I think he wears very functional clothing that's natural colored. He said he didn't like wearing bright colors because, he was afraid. He made reference to the fact that he was fearful of wearing bright colors because he was easily seen. He wore greens and blacks and things like that. So I think those are all leftover things from his childhood when he grew up.
He wanted to blend in. Stay with us, Oliver. Much more to come on Coast to Coast AM. And our special guest, Oliver Williams. Next hour, we'll open up the phone lines for you. I'm just about giving up on our John Titor hotline. John is probably gone. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie with Oliver Williams. Oliver, what about the possibilities that Titor was just someone from our own time era, but he was a psychic and was just very intuitive?
Well, I suppose that's possible, but even that's remarkable. The best theory I've heard, if he's not a time traveler, is that it's a large group of people, maybe 10 or 12, that all specialize in one or two things, and then they got together
and created this guy.
Yeah. If you think about it, you'd have to know about physics, you'd have to be able to draw, you'd have to know about science. There's a whole host of things you'd have to be able to know about to do this.
But the bottom line is they still saw the future, whoever they may be.
Right, yeah. There's a couple of things here. These are just little, but just to whet your appetite. Here's a couple of interesting things that happened in the last few weeks, which I thought were kind of interesting. When John was asked he was asked once if there was any poetry from his time that he remembered, and he recited a few lines from a poem that he said was written in the future. It's called A Soldier's Winter. And I got an email about a month ago from a guy who found that poem online. It was written in 2005 by a soldier, as John said, and when you look at the lines, they are damn close to exactly what John was talking about. And he said that as time went on in the future, it was changed and added to, but that poem now exists 5 years after John said it was going to be written. Something else he pointed out was that he said that in the future the internet is done by using these self-powered, solar-powered nodes that can transfer the internet quite a long distance. And last week, Motorola came out and said they now have it. It's a little box that goes on top of, like a telephone pole. It's solar-powered, and apparently you can space these things about 60 miles? You can use these things about 60 miles apart, and it was exactly the system that John described.
Of everything that he talked about, what one prediction, what one glance into the future still amazes you?
I still lean on the CERN thing, because in my opinion, if John isn't real, then the science is not going to be real. I mean, you can say, oh, we stopped the Civil War, oh, this isn't coming true, but if the science is real about time travel, then I think that there's something to this. And so far, it has been. Everything he said about the way his time machine works and about the way the science works is now being backed up by real scientists and real money.
What if they can only go into the future, in the future? You just can't go back.
Well, I looked into this when he talked about a specific thing. Anybody can go online and look this up. It's a special type of black hole called a Kerr black hole. And I guess it was a scientist who's still alive. I think his name is Roger Kerr. I can't remember his exact name. But he laid out the exact mathematics for these special types of black holes where you could pass through them safely and end up in a different universe. So to some degree, you're right, George. You can't travel back in your own time, but you can appear to travel back in time by passing through this black hole into an alternate universe. So, based on the math, based on what he said, it looks like it might be real.
It's incredible. We're going to play the portion of the Larry Haber interview in about 7 minutes or so, Oliver. He was picked up, the Teeter story was picked up all over the place. Even Larry Flint, publisher of a Hustler magazine, is interested in him.
That was 2 years ago. And in fact, I still get, I get requests to do newspaper interviews, lots of little broadcasts on the internet are still interviewing about it. So, a lot of people are just finding out about it now.
You're not John Teeter, are you?
No, George, I'm not. I do get that every now and then.
I always ask you that. It's the disclaimer of the moment.
I'm trying to think, if I was John Teeter, what would I do? How, would I have done anything differently? And, no, I'm not. I get that all the time, but no, I'm not John Teeter.
Did John ever talk about going beyond 2036?
Yes, he did. He said that there are missions that go into the future, but they're not really that useful. So, he was hoping that maybe that would be on his mission profile when he got back, but he wasn't betting on it. If you think about it, if you go into the future, you're only going to be able to experience what's going on in that world line, then you got to come back. So you're not really going to change anything, or you're going to bring any useful information back that's 100% accurate.
Well, that is true, too. Would you like John Teeter to come back, Oliver?
It would be interesting to talk to him. I think, looking at what he said, I think there were a lot of things he wanted to talk about that nobody asked him. Religion, philosophy, how the universe works. I think all of those discussions would have been very interesting.
Pretend you are interviewing John Teeter, and of course, let's have you play both parts for a second. What would you ask him first?
I would ask point blank why he came to 2000 and 2001. What was it that he changed or did that he referred to that he was trying to fix? And I think that would give us a lot more insight into what's going on in the world today. That's the one thing.
What do you think he'd say?
I think there's a high chance he felt guilty about altering Y2K so it doesn't happen for us. And I don't know how he would have done that. Maybe he talked to enough people where they looked at it in 1975 and said, oh my gosh, this guy's right. We need to fix this now. And that's why it didn't happen. But there was something that happened in 1975 that was compelling enough for him to go, off mission and spend a lot of time here.
I wonder what happens when the little John Teeter of today grows up. He's aware, you said that the time traveler met the little John Teeter himself. I wonder if the little John Teeter knew who he was. I mean, did he say, I'm you in the future, little guy? And the guy probably, the little kid has no idea what he's talking about.
Yeah, I think, I'm thinking about that. And John claims to have been born in 1998. So if he went to 1998, that might have been the reason he went there. That was when he was born or about to be born. So he came forward to 2000, 2001, he would have been 2 or 3. So I don't think he'd been old enough to know who he was, but, certainly that had to be a bizarre experience, meeting yourself, as a kid. I recall him saying that he remembers incidents where he saw his parents interacting with his young self, and then he had realizations about why they were doing that or why he was the kind of person that he was. Imagine being able to go back in time and look at your parents interacting with you and then having an insight as to how that affected your personality and made you who you were.
What would you do if you saw yourself, Oliver, as a little boy?
George, I don't know. It seems fascinating, but at the same time, it seems scary, doesn't it? I mean...
I would, you know what I'd say? Well, I'm kidding, of course. Microsoft.
Yeah, Microsoft, exactly. But see, again, that's exactly the kind of thinking that just ticks him off.
Absolutely.
Yeah, is that what you're thinking about when you go back in time? It shows how greedy, and not you, of course, but as a society.
No, I was only kidding. I would never do that if I had inside information back into the future. Boy, that would really, if time travel is possible, that would really screw up the stock exchange, wouldn't it?
No, absolutely. The other thing I think is interesting, and the perspective I have on this, is that if time travel is real, the way he described it, then it's sort of a personal experience that you could never absolutely explain to somebody else. I mean, think about it. If you were a time traveler, George, how could you absolutely prove to somebody that you were telling the truth? You really couldn't do it unless you took them in your time machine and traveled in time with them. But if you did that, then they would never be able to get back to where they started to tell all their friends that it's real.
Unless you gave them predictions that would come true, that were not too far into the future, so that the individual in question could witness them.
Right. But even now, it's ridiculous, George. How can you believe in this? I mean, I second guess it all the time. I just can't bring myself to fully believe that this is true.
Well, I know that. I agree with that, except if one believes that in the future time travel is possible, then you have to conclude that they came back during different time periods, like the UFOs could be. Lots of people speculate that they are future time travelers. I mean, so that is possible. I mean, when we open up the phone lines, when Art has opened up the phone lines and time travelers call, sure, most of it's entertainment and fun, and 99.999% of the people are people here on this planet during this time period. But, there's always that moment of doubt that if time travel is possible, then you're going to get a time traveler who calls the phone. Now, Larry Haber is the attorney for the John Titor family when they were living in Florida, and then they moved to Nebraska. I had an opportunity about 2 years ago to talk with him, and we also talked with John Titor's mother through Larry Haber. This is an edited version. We tightened it up a little bit, but I would ask Haber a question to John Titor's mother, and Larry would relay it and then get the answer and bring it back. So for brevity, we've put this together. Larry, can you tell us, first of all, your association with either John Titor, the time traveler, or the family?
I was contacted by a friend of mine from law school a few years ago, and said that he was looking for somebody that did some entertainment law work, which I do, and then explained to me the story that is probably pretty well known to the people that are listening right now. And I said, well, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, and I don't believe it. He said, no, give it a try. I really need some help with this thing. So I went ahead and took the couple of calls and have been involved with it for the last 3 years now.
Are you baffled, perplexed? It is indeed a strange story, is it not?
Baffled, perplexed, and everything in between, sure. I have no idea if any of this is real or not, or true or not. I know that they believe it's real. The few times I've had direct contact with the family, and the many times I've had it through my friend, have led me to believe that these guys really think that everything they keep talking about is absolutely real. But I'm too far removed from it to really get a good handle on it.
Larry, have you met anybody face to face?
No.
Okay.
I have not, except for my friend who, I haven't seen him in years. So I know the person that has made the contact with me, but not anybody from the family. Just a couple of phone conversations with John's mom, Kay, and that's all I've had.
Okay, but you still represent them, I assume.
I represent them, that's correct.
Okay, now I understand you have Kay on another line. She does not want to come on the program. She does not want to come on the program directly with her voice, but she will answer questions through you. So let me first of all ask you if Kay saw John Titor from the future.
Okay, let me ask. Has Kay seen John Titor from the future? She's telling me that when he left in March of 2001, she hasn't seen the older version of him since then.
Since then?
Correct.
Is there a smaller version of John Titor, and if so, how old is he right now?
There is, and he's about to turn 8 years old.
About to turn 8 years old. Has the 8-year-old John Titor met the adult John Titor from the future?
I'm glad I'm asking her that. I couldn't answer any of these things. Hold on. They were together for the 3 years when John was here. The future John was here from the past. In the past, I should say. It gets a little confusing.
Did her future son talk to her at all about the family, how long they would live, or anything personal like that?
Kay was pretty insistent that she said that at the time she said absolutely not. I don't want to know any details of the future because she was just spooked her. So as far as I can tell from her right now, they have no idea about anything that took place in the future or will take place in the future.
Larry, how did she first come about and meet the John Titor from the future? How did that all occur for her?
In April of '98, he visited them in Florida and stayed for a couple of months, then came back in June and spent the next 3 years with them, but knew how to find him because obviously he knew where he was living back then.
Why did she believe this individual who would probably show up at their doorstep and say, "Hi, Mom, I'm John Titor"?
I'm John, right.
Yeah.
Good one, because, again, that's the biggest one for me to try to figure out. Hold on. Good question. She says to first meeting she knew it was him, but it took her about a day to really accept it or figure it out that it was real, or that it really could be real. I don't think she still was convinced that quickly, but you know, she's telling me how I'm trying to repeat the words. How can a mother not know her son, basically?
Even if he's much older.
Right, right.
Was she proud of him?
Basically terrified.
Terrified of him? Why?
Terrified. I think it's for the same reason, not wanting to be on the phone now or get more involved than this way. Just when you get hit with something like that, she said, basically, I'm not that sophisticated a person, and to get hit with something like that, it was, you know, why would my son come back? What's wrong in the future? What's going to happen to us? What's going to happen to everybody, and so on. So it took her a while to get over the fear. You know, very afraid, very fearful, quite almost terrified, I think, from given the way her voice sounds.
Is she pretty well convinced that John went back to his own time era, or has he moved on to other time periods?
She doesn't personally believe he went anywhere else. He really didn't enjoy what he went to do the first time around, and she thinks that he probably would have stayed and not accepted taking another assignment.
Okay, so if I understand you, she thinks that John Titor from the future is still here in our time period.
No, is in his current time frame in the future.
She went back.
Didn't do any more time traveling, right.
Okay.
And that's part of the reason why he probably hasn't been back here.
Understand. There is a book that is being sold now. It's called John Titor, A Time Traveler's Tale. It's a paperback. It's by John Titor. I assume is written by the mother. Do you, Larry, as the attorney, do you have anything to do with that? Do you represent them on that at all?
Just in terms of getting the publishing, I mean, I can tell you that all I was responsible for was to make sure that the copyrights were filed right, and the things really incidental to it, but had no other involvement with the book itself.
Self-published, or is there a big publisher behind it?
Self-published. No, self-published.
Okay. Is there anything else on the horizon with regards to this John Titor story that you know of?
Well, I am aware of a movie. Kay had hired me, or actually continued to hire me, but asked me to about a year ago to take a look at making some type of video or film about the story, so that it would be more widely known than just what's out there now. And so because I do entertainment work, I'm in Orlando and do work with a lot of video companies. One of those companies is working on a film. I have no idea what stage they're at. They told me that they've spent some time with some phone interviews and they were going to put something together for release this year, but I haven't seen anything or really don't know much more about it other than that.
I'm sure the family wishes to remain somewhat anonymous, so they moved from Florida to someplace in the Midwest, I understand?
Nebraska, from what I understand, but that's just what they're telling me. I couldn't tell you if that's really where they're calling from. When they call me, it's no caller ID.
Okay, so she is relatively confidential still, I assume.
Correct, and wants to remain that way. That's the problem. I've probably only talked to her 3-4 times out of the whole couple of year period. And most of it is just through either emails or through a friend of mine that relays messages.
Well, there are a couple of possibilities, Larry, as you know, and as you mentioned at the outset. Either it is a true story that there is indeed time traveling going on in the future and that some of these individuals, including John Titor, have come back into our time period to warn us about some events. Or this may be one of the most methodically thought out hoaxes I've ever heard of, in that most hoaxes occur and they go away. This thing it seems to be well planned and well thought out as an event.
Yeah, and it's funny for me because I'm so incidental to it. I've got a full law practice and I do a whole bunch of other things, and I don't even have much time to spend on the internet to even look at it. And then when it pops up, I get all wrapped up in it again for a day or two, and then it goes away for a while, and then it comes back again. It's very, very interesting for me, too.
You may be the only attorney to represent a family or a time traveler from the future.
And I am very interested in the sciences and the possibility of that, so I keep going along, and hopefully I'll find out, too, someday.
You're not getting paid in $2,036, are you?
No. At least that part of it's current.
So
but again, I'm not doing a whole lot of work. That's why I don't really get that involved with it on a day-to-day basis. It's usually just some quick questions, or how do we clear this, or do you know somebody that can produce this kind of thing. So I really do very minimal work. My involvement with stuff like this and interviewing, even though I got interviewed for a documentary that was out that was produced last year, that takes up a lot more of the time than anything I've ever billed for, but it's been fun.
In your entire law practice career, is this got to be one of the strangest cases you've ever had?
This is the best. That's why I enjoy doing it. It's absolutely fun.
Okay, next hour, Oliver Williams and your phone calls on Coast to Coast AM. And we're going to take your phone calls next. Oliver Williams, our special guest. John Titor questions right ahead. Oliver, very informative tonight, by the way. Thank you for what you've been doing.
Oh, no problem, George.
Let's go to the phones. Let's pick it up by going to our first-time caller line. Hello there. You're on the air with us.
Hi, my name is Lorenzo from Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Hey, Lorenzo. Go ahead.
I was just kind of wondering about deja vu, maybe, and time travel. I've slipped in and out of sleep, and I've had deja vu when I've been asleep, I should say. And maybe you can slip into another reality like that somehow, maybe. I'm not sure.
Actually, you bring up an interesting point, and John did talk sort of about this. He said that in the future, there's a theory. They believe that there is some sort of a connection between all of the yous in all of the multiple universes out there. And the idea is that memory is actually you accessing an event that's occurring with another you in the past, and looking forward or imagining what might happen, you're accessing what's actually happening with a version of yourself that's in the future. So deja vu might actually be a connection that you have with another you that's very close to you in another universe. So you feel like you're experiencing the same thing.
We've all had that experience too, Oliver.
Yes, we have.
Let's go to our wild card line. Hi there, Harry. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Pleasanton, Texas. How are y'all this evening?
Thanks, Harry.
I have a hard time grasping this time situation and time travel because, I feel like time is nothing more than a arbitrary unit of measure. And, we break it up according to things that happen around us, the sun rising and setting and so forth. But if you think about it, time has absolutely no valid measurement. You can continue to break it down to the most infinite unit of measure. And I think, the universe has always been here and always will be. I'm the Alpha and the Omega and always have and always will be. There is no unit of measure because there's no beginning and no end. That being said, my point is this. how can our breaking up time, what we call time, into units of measure, tell us any more about what time is than if we were to measure how wide the Atlantic Ocean is and think we understand? That tells us what the Atlantic Ocean is.
Here's my take on it.
Okay.
I think being able to measure time only helps you in a mechanical sense. For example, your example of knowing how wide the ocean is, well, that would be useful if you're trying to sail across it. You would know it's going to take me this many days, I need to bring this much food. And I think that's the same thing with time travel, is that time is only useful as a measurement in a mechanical sense when you're using the machine. But I agree with you. Everything you said about time is it has no meaning, has no beginning and end. That's true inside of our universe, which is closed. But the way that John described it is you're actually stepping out of our universe into another universe. So the measurement of time is only useful based on, your perception of where you are. Am I in 1970? Am I in 1982? I mean, that's how it's useful as far as time travel goes.
Did John Titor ever say if anything would go wrong with time travel, technically, that would create some kind of a split in the space-time continuum or physically hurt him or anybody else?
No, the only thing he said was that, if you go past the limit of the machine, you end up in a universe that's so weird and strange from the one that you were expecting that, it's not useful. And that if the machine had some sort of a malfunction, that would immediately stop where it was, and he called it dropping out. If for some reason, let's say you're sitting still, you're using the machine, and unexpectedly somebody builds a building right where you're sitting. Well, the machine would sense that before it happened, and then you would drop out right before the building was built, so you would be safe. So other than that, the only other thing he did say was that the technology to build the time machine could also be used to build a very destructive weapon. That was the only other thing he said.
Let's go to our wild card line. You're up. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, hi. I forgot that I had called on the wild card line.
That's all right.
Okay, good morning, gentlemen. You had said that John had said that traveling into the future would not be very productive. That you couldn't bring anything back to the past that would be productive. My contention in this is, what if, say, I can travel into the future and I travel there, and at that time I see problems that have happened in society, and I can research from that time what has happened between then and now, the present, and see what led to those problems. Possibly travel back to the present where I am, where we are right now, and use that information to help prevent those problems from occurring.
You know what? I think you're right. What I meant by that was that in John's time, going back into the past was useful for what they were trying to do at that moment. But I think you're right. You could go forward in time, get a piece of information, or even maybe get a piece of technology that would be useful and bring it back. But based on the way he described it, it's like, let's say, we go in the future 10 years, we look at what's going on, and then we come back, we say, hey, here are all the things that are going on, but there are so many factors that would change that because you now know about it. If I were a time traveler and I came to you and I said, 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, you're going to get hit by a bus. Well, you're not going to be on that street at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So the bus isn't going to hit you. So I think it's a cascade of events like that.
So if you came back and told me, that would mean that I had never been hit. And so you'd have nothing to tell me.
Well, in another universe, in the future, you had been hit and you're dead.
Right.
So I came back to this one and I warn you, look, don't go on that bus tomorrow. And you probably had every intention of doing that.
Right.
And now you're not going to do that.
So would you say that is sort of like the alternate realities? Is sort of like now you've created another future by changing that fact that I was not hit by that bus?
Exactly. In fact, John even said the moment you turn the time machine off, you've changed things. Just because you're there, you've already changed things.
Just by being present.
Correct.
People have seen you
Right. You
stepped on a bug.
You drove over grass that wasn't driven over before. You did things that, you breathed air no one breathed before. I mean, just being there, making those changes has an effect.
What if you brought back a germ?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, John's mom said that he had a lot of colds, that it took him a long time to adapt to being here. And if you think about it, that makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
You go back 50 years, you're going to be exposed to viruses you were never exposed to.
Right, but what if I went into the future and I came back and I brought back something that we had no immunity to?
That would be bad. I agree with you.
I mean, time travel's amazingly fascinating. I've always been fascinated, like Back to the Future. But the repercussions could be just as amazingly bad.
Yeah, it's a heck of a responsibility.
Okay, thanks so much. Next up, let's go to our west of the Rockies line. Donald in Taos, New Mexico. Hi there.
Yeah, I'm calling from Taos, New Mexico.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Where I'm from here, there are many Native American old stories about how the tribes here came from within the earth, or that they had arrived from several different places before coming here. My question to you, Oliver, is whether or not John ever mentioned anything about ancient wormholes, and if that was ever a possibility, and whether or not ancient wormholes could ever still be active or reactivate, and if ancient civilizations were, ever part of the entire history of all of, how things have come about.
Interesting you should bring that up. What he did say was that the physics that allow his time machine to work, it does exist in nature. And it's a specific type of black hole called a Kerr black hole. And what's different about this black hole is that it's spinning very rapidly, and it has an electric charge. And according to John, and according to the physics, which you can go look up yourself, if it's charged and it's spinning, it has two event horizons. And there is a path where you can travel through the singularity of that black hole where you would not be torn apart by the gravity, and you would emerge on the other side in a different, reality or a different universe as described. So yes, natural time travel does exist. I don't know, if anybody's found a black hole, a Kerr black hole in space, but according to John, naturally those do exist.
Okay, thanks for that call. Let's go to our wild card line. You're on the air. Hi there.
Hi, I'm Linda from Alameda, California.
Hey, hello, Linda. Thanks.
And I thank you for a wonderful show, wonderful topic. I've always been fascinated by the idea of time travel. But, Oliver, the thing that would make me really curious, have you ever spoken to John either in person or on the phone? If so, how many times? Would you recognize the voice if you heard it again?
I don't think you've ever talked to John Titor.
I haven't. I came to the story late, a couple of years after he left, almost a couple of years. However, there are people still online that did interact directly with him in the forums. And they're not hard to find. So if you're looking for somebody that actually had a chat or conversation with him, that'd probably be the place to start.
Okay, thank you so much.
You got it.
Wouldn't that be great to be able to play a tape, the voice of John Titor?
I couldn't imagine that either.
East of the Rockies, you're up with us. Hello there.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, this is Katie from Indiana.
Hi, Katie.
How are you guys doing tonight?
We're well. Good. Thanks.
Wonderful. Well, I had a question to ask you, actually. This is very intriguing. I've been actually reading a lot of books by Michio Kaku. Mm-hmm. And he writes about theories of hyperspace and how, a ripple can be is made in the universe, and that's how light travels through it, because everything travels in waves. That's one of his theories. But I was calling to ask you, I heard on a science channel about atoms, that they disappear and then they reappear. Is it kind of like, does that have something to do, is it possible to actually create a wormhole to the point that you could be standing and then disappear and then reappear? Because they don't know where these atoms go.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. In fact, that reminds me the way that John described how time travel works when you're on the other end watching it happen. He said that from the perspective, he would leave for his military mission, wherever he would leave from.
Mm-hmm.
And he said from the perspective of the people in 2036, he'd only be gone a couple of seconds, or maybe a minute.
Wow.
But he had aged the amount of time that he was with us. So it would almost seem like it's instantaneous. You leave and then you come back, mission's over, thanks for the computer. So from their perspective, it was just a second. He had aged the amount of time that he was with us. So it would almost seem like it's instantaneous. You leave and then you come back, mission's over, thanks for the computer. So from their perspective, it was just a second. But for his perspective, it was, 4 or 5 years.
Right. Because it's really interesting. I heard a gentleman earlier, he called in, he was talking about how we can't tell time, but I study mathematics. I do discrete mathematics for computers right now. And from what I've learned is that when you have a point A, you're always going to have a point B, or it's an infinite line. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're measuring time by the sun.
Right.
So, I don't know. I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Well, the other thing, too, John mentioned that they're called cesium clocks, and it's what they use to control the time machine. And I guess it's some sort of a release of the cesium atom that happens on a regular basis that conforms to the second. So, from John's perspective, in the time machine, a second is actually the measurement of something happening on an atomic scale, not something that's happening on your watch.
Wow. That's crazy. And that's something out of sci-fi. I mean, you see all these movies when they travel back into space, into time, and they change one thing and it just destroys the whole entire world.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a butterfly effect, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Next up, let's go to our wild card line. You're up with us. Hello there. You're on with
Yes,
Oliver.
Hi, George. Hi, Oliver. Hi, this is Bill in West Hartford, Connecticut.
Hi, Bill.
Hi, Oliver. I'm an amateur astronomer, so I know physics. And using quantum mechanics, it's inconceivable to me, of all the timelines, of all the universes, that John Titor would end up in our universe, our timeline. So my question to you is, do you think it's possible that the instant John Titor left 2036, he split into an infinite amount of John Titors, each into a different timeline, one of them in our timeline, and then when they went back to 2036, they all reformed, morphed into one person back to 2036 again?
I suppose that's possible, but since you mentioned quantum mechanics, isn't it one of the bedrocks of quantum mechanics that everything is possible or everything is happening at once, that quantum mechanics says that every possible combination is happening?
Yes.
Therefore, there's an infinite number of Johns, an infinite number of yous, an infinite number of perspectives where all this is going on at the same time. So, yeah, maybe we are lucky he showed up here, but then you think about it, there must be infinite other universes where the same thing is happening right now.
Well, how come he showed up here and not a different timeline?
Well, maybe there's lots of yous that experience the same thing, that experience lots of him showing up. So, from that perspective, it might not just be one you and one me and one John. It'd be an infinite number of all of us experiencing the same thing at a different level.
I see what you're saying. And I have a second question, please.
Sure. Go ahead, Bill.
Yes. Has John mentioned anything about the space program as far as finding life on Mars or unmanned missions or missions looking at the Big Bang, such as the European Planck spacecraft that will be launched July 31st?
Yeah, John's future was radically different from ours, but he did say that they are just now starting to, revamp the space program, and that they're looking at ways to use this technology to do that. He talked about being able to use the time machine so that you could travel great distances in space. However, he said that if you did that, you'd actually be traveling to another universe. So you turn it on, you arrive at the moon, you turn it off, and yes, it took you a shorter amount of time to get there, but you're now in a slightly different universe from the one that you started in. So you're still traveling in time, but you're also traveling in space.
Oliver, did he have any heroes? Did he mention anybody specifically?
Wow, that's a good question. He talked about a general during the Civil War that apparently everybody looked up to. He didn't give too many details about that, but he said there's a statue of him. And, oh boy, what?
In the Civil War, you're talking about the predicted Civil War.
Right, the predicted Civil War. He said there's a statue of the general holding, either holding a firearm or doing something, and it's in Omaha. And that was the only one that he spoke about.
There is a statue of Saddam Hussein that they pulled down. It looks just like it. I hope he's not talking about him.
Yeah, I hope not too.
You never know. You never know. Let's go to one more call before the break, Oliver. Then we'll come back with final calls. First-time caller line. Hi there.
Hi, how you doing?
Good.
This is Jeremy. I'm in New York City right now.
Jeremy, thanks.
I wanted to thank you for taking my call. I wanted to throw it back for a second and tie this in with the concept of deja vu. I had taken some courses from Dr. Charles Tart while he was doing a special class at UNLV in Las Vegas, and I discussed with him the possibility of deja vu being the subconscious mind exceeding the processing rate of the conscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time that your conscious mind is realizing it, it's sort of already in the deeper memory and in your long-term memory. And I'm wondering if that might even pass on to a further rate of time travel by like getting way beyond what the conscious mind is. And so you're actually leaving sort of this time without really leaving it, and it's maybe all happening in your brain.
Yeah, I mean, you think about such subject as like remote viewing. I mean, where you could view,
right?
The idea of you could see something that's happening a distance from you, but you're not traveling there. Or as John stated, the idea that you're actually, when you think about something that happened to you in the past right now, and what you're actually doing is accessing the event that's actually occurring to another version of yourself in the past. It's not something in your brain. It's your brain connecting to another version of you that's actually experiencing that right now.
All right, well, stay with us. We'll be back with final phone calls with Oliver Williams, webmaster of JohnTeeter.com, in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. On our next Coast to Coast program, singer, songwriter, actress Helen Reddy joins us to talk about higher consciousness. Looking forward to that. And then we'll go into our Full Moon Friday open lines. Oliver, what's in store for you next? You do things, I don't know, you've never told us about what else you do. Is that, you keep that private?
Yeah, it's one of the arrangements I had to make with my wife to do this, is that she said, you can talk about anything, just don't talk about us, don't talk about where we live or what we do, because she's terrified about what happened to Larry.
Yep, I can understand. Okay, let's go back. We'll wrap up with final calls west of the Rockies. Hi, Dee.
How you guys doing?
Good. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wondered, how did John Teeter control where he showed up? Now, you said he could control whether he showed up on a building or not. So let's say he just showed up in a field right next to somebody's yard, or did he care if anybody saw him?
Yeah, actually, he said the time machine is accurate to the second. So basically, he would figure out or type into the computer, whatever he had, where he wanted to be. And then he would park it in a remote location and then turn the unit on, and then it would work. And he said the speed through time was, that maximum speed was, I think, 10 years an hour. So you'd calculate where you needed to be, how long it would take you, and then the machine would turn itself off and you would be there. But he did say that it had a fail-safe system in case something random happened and, wherever he was would change and the machine would stop before that happened.
So then he would just store it or carry it with him? Because you said it was like a suitcase size bit.
Yeah, actually, he apparently kept it in the vehicle that he was using. So the field was big enough to encompass him and the vehicle that he would be in. He said that it was fairly heavy and difficult to move around, so he had to stay in a vehicle that had a heavy suspension, he said. So I'm guessing it was very heavy. But, I got the impression that it was left in the vehicle or stored someplace while I wasn't using it.
Okay, but he could just go with just in any remote location.
Correct.
Okay. All right, then. You guys have a good night.
As we continue to talk about time travel, Oliver, machines like CERN that could bust through and create this black hole. Again, John Teeter did not say if anything would go awry here, but there are some scientists out there that think that this isn't a great idea.
Yeah, my understanding is they're afraid that if they do create a black hole, and they can't control it, what's going to happen? Is it going to, begin swallowing up matter and then eat its way to the center of the Earth and destroy the planet? I guess some real scientists are concerned that might happen.
Next up, let's go to our wild card line. You're up with us. Hello there.
Hello, gentlemen.
Hi.
Hi. I have two questions for Oliver.
Sure.
And the first one, a caller earlier mentioned alternate realities.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if you could expound on that a little bit, because a couple of years ago, my son appeared in two places at the same time.
Wow, that is interesting.
Yeah, it is.
You know, I guess my understanding of it is, if you look at what quantum physics says, which is that every state of every atom is existing at the same time in another reality right next to it. So that means, you know, wherever you are, look, if you've got a coffee table next to you or your clock radio, somewhere there's a universe where that clock radio is an inch to the left. Somewhere there's a universe where it's an inch to the right. And that's the only thing that's different in that entire universe. So think about all of the matter in our universe and all of the possibilities and all of the changes on a quantum level, and that's how many different universes there are. So basically what this machine lets you do is travel between them. You know, and John said that, you know, he could travel to a universe and he would only notice subtle differences. Like he said, a sports team that won a game that didn't win one in his history, or little things like that. So imagine the infinite number of realities there are, and it just boggles your mind.
So does that mean my son was time traveling?
Maybe, you know, I mean, if that happened according to the physics John laid out, you know, maybe your son traveled back a minute and met himself, whereas none of the other versions of himself did that. So, yeah, I guess maybe that is possible.
Okay. My other question had to do with the ABC series Lost. I was wondering if you were watching that.
You know, I'm aware of it, but I'm not sure I could answer any questions about it, but I'll try.
Okay, because it touches on so many interesting things like time travel, you know, teleportation, alternate realities, timelines. So
it's a pretty
I wanted to check it
successful
out.
show. Okay, hey, thank you.
You're welcome.
Pretty successful show indeed. Did he ever, what did he do for fun, Oliver?
Well, that's a good question. You know, one interesting thing, when you played back the Larry Haber interview, I had forgotten this, but did you recall that the mother said that John did arrive in 1998, and then he left for a period of time and came back?
Yes.
So I'm wondering, what was he doing during that period?
And why did he leave?
Right. I mean, my guess is that maybe he decided to go forward a little bit and see what was going on and then come back and warn us about it.
Well, that's a good point.
But, no, I have no idea what he did in his spare time. That would be interesting to know.
East of the Rockies, you're up with us. Hi there.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering, George and Oliver, if why is John Titor so believable? I mean, I'm not sure. It's because if somebody predicts the future, and it's after the event, you know, then why would he be believable over them?
That's a good question. So I guess some of his predictions came true.
Well, I mean, yeah, keep in mind, all of these things that we've been talking about, he wrote, you know, between 2000 and 2001. So none of this stuff was immediately after the fact. It's all online, and you can read it. And, you know, there's no doubt that that's when he wrote it.
I wonder if he was a great futurist, you know, like someone who analyzes trends. He was able to spot these things and predict them that way.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. You know, I'm just trying to think back if there's anything that could have gone, you know, either way. Any of the things that, you know, a lot of what he said that's come forward is technology. So, you know, I suppose you could say that. You know, if he knew a lot about different subjects and was able to make some accurate guesses, I suppose that's possible.
I mean, in the 50s, for example, Oliver, if you were reading Popular Mechanics, you would see the incredible things they would put on the cover that didn't really happen for another 20, 30, 40 years.
Well, you know, I'm just thinking back, you know, the example of the poem, that is not a technology issue. And a soldier did write that poem 5 years after John said it would be written.
And it was not rewritten from an earlier poem where he would have been able to have seen it.
So that's an example of something that, you know, could have been totally random. You know, they may have picked a different title. They may have written about a different subject. It may not have been written by a soldier, but those are all things that he said would happen.
First-time caller line, welcome to the show. Hi there.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi. my name's John, calling out of Las Vegas.
Okay, John.
Yeah, hi. Both of you guys, great show. I just wanted to throw this out there. George, I heard you earlier ask Oliver if there had been any movies or movies coming out or anything like that.
Right, on John Titor, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess, Oliver, you had said not that you were aware of?
Well, I'm aware that somebody's working on one, and, if you do a Google search on YouTube for John Titor, you're going to find a ton of stuff that people are making themselves or working on. So, there is stuff out there. I'm just not sure.
Well, I wanted to throw this out there at you. I don't know if you remember a few years back, I think it started in, I want to say 93, and it ran through maybe up to 98. And I don't know if this is just coincidence or, but it was a mini-series on TV called Sliders.
Oh, yeah, I remember that show.
And I was a huge fan of that, watched it faithfully, and everything that I've heard tonight that you talk about with John Titor and everything, it's Sliders.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I remember that show, too, and you're absolutely right.
And imagine a roulette wheel and infinite number of Earths and, an infinite number of spots, and, you can travel. It's just...
keep in mind, too.
Do you think that John Titor had any influence in that? Because it's the whole story with him. I don't know who produced it or made that show, but do you think that his story had anything to do with that? Because it's so close to what you've talked about tonight.
Oh, I agree. The difference, though, I think, is if you look back, that far back, that was science fiction. And John laid out very specific details about the science, which, for example, in Sliders, they were trying to get back to the universe that they left.
Right.
Well, according to John, you can't do that. And now, according to Ronald Mallett, you can't do that. According to the scientists at CERN, you can't do that. So there are very specific details about the science that if John was just making it up, he got lucky and he got it right.
Well, I think, too, with the show, as the time progressed with the show, they had to elaborate on a lot of things there to make the show keep going and make it more interesting. And so for them to get back and finally did get back to where they started, I think that was just to keep the show going. But,
I agree. But, what science fiction one day becomes real the next day,
right.
That's happened throughout history.
Well, I totally believe that time travel is possible. I just think we haven't figured out how to do it yet.
Well, maybe when CERN turns on the collider, we're going to be one step closer.
Maybe. One step closer to something. Wildcard Line, you're up with us on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hi, my name is Matt from Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. Okay, Matt.
I've been researching this story since 2001.
So you must really know some things.
Well, in 2006, I found a patent application on the USPTO website that was filed in 2004 describing, get this, a method of gravity distortion and time displacement. It was number 2006-007-3976. That's 2006-007-3976. Now, it looked a whole lot like the Titor diagrams. The strange thing was that a couple of the citations about the physics and the bibliography were dated July 2007. So I kept watching, and I set a Google agent, and I found the citations in New Scientist in late August 2007. And the only thing I can figure out is either someone did a typo or the physics hadn't been invented when the patent was filed in 2004.
Yeah, a lot of people have speculated that one of the reasons John may have been online was that he was slowly spreading the technology out and either hoping or knowing that somebody was going to put it together.
Did real scientists start looking at him too?
I remember, a group of people had contacted some science and had shown some of John's stuff to him, and, of course they came back and said, this is all hogwash. But that was, like 2002, 2003. So, I kept looking to see if in mainstream science some of these ideas would come out. And, George, they have, multiple realities, the idea of black holes being used to manipulate gravity, the details about how the machine works. All this stuff now is mainstream science. And we look at it and go, oh, yeah, sure. But 10 years ago, people thought that was ridiculous.
Could be. Let's go next to east of the Rockies. You're on Coast to Coast with us. Hi there.
Hello, this is Greg from Barrie, Ontario, Canada.
Sure thing. Go ahead.
I'd just like to make the point that I believe in the story of John Titor, but I don't believe that time traveler is the correct description of him.
What would you call him?
Well, I would call him a dimensional traveler because time basically is just a concept, not a reality, and his future is not necessarily our future.
I would agree with you on that. But I think from John's perspective, that was the only way that he could describe what he was doing. But you know what? When you think about it, I think you're absolutely right. He's not a time traveler. He's a dimension traveler.
Yeah, because I believe that you can't actually travel time because our life is not really a string from point A to point B. It's an event all at once, and it only appears to happen in time because that's the only way our conscious can recognize it.
Well, on that same point, from the perspective of John, he would be traveling in time. If you didn't understand the physics or where you were, you use a machine, you turn it off, and suddenly you're 10 years in the past. From that perspective, it seems like you're traveling in time.
In the world line of 2036, major changes for the United States. Well, what about the rest of the world?
Yeah, he goes on to describe country by country when people asked him. Of course, and George, we get a zillion hits from overseas, from Korea and Japan and China. And, apparently China, and John used the word annex, Japan, Korea, South Korea, Taiwan. Apparently China is much larger now, larger in 2036 than it is now. He said South America, basically they have their own problems, but they weren't involved in the nuclear war. He said Europe is basically a mess, just like the United States was, and the Middle East was a mess. Oh, he also said that Australia was able to fend off an invasion by China. That was something else he said. Boy, those are the things I can remember right off the top of my head. But yeah, he did give some details about what was going on in the world.
Okay, we'll take some final calls here. And also, by the way, first hour Monday night, Dr. Ron Paul, Republican candidate for president, even though McCain just about has everything wrapped up. He will be our guest on Coast to Coast AM, and we'll take your phone calls. We had him on for a bit some time ago, but Ron Paul will be on the program. Those zillions of you who have been emailing me over the last couple months, his campaign has called Tom tonight and said, yeah, of course, we want to be on, and here's the night. So circle your calendar. Monday night, 10 o'clock Pacific time, Dr. Ron Paul will be on to take your questions, and we'll talk a little bit about just what's going on in the United States. Let's go west of the Rockies. You're up with us. Hi there.
Hello?
Yeah.
Is it me? Oh,
yes,
yeah. My name's Doug, and I'm in Hollywood, California.
Yeah,
and
Doug.
Okay, what I was going to ask was, Oliver mentioned something about cesium clocks, and we've been using cesium clocks for a few decades now to measure time very accurately. So I was just wondering if John Titor had mentioned something about the advancement of the technology, or my question was along those lines.
Okay,
Did
Oliver,
he
go
discuss
ahead.
the advancement of technology?
All right, thank you. And I'll let you listen on the radio as we only have a minute and 20 seconds left.
Yeah, actually he did. He said the cesium clock there's 4 of them in the time machine, and they independently measure, the events that are occurring with the black holes. He mentioned something about it uses a laser or some sort of an optical system to check the frequency. And he also said that the unit that was one step up from his uses 6 clocks, and it's much more accurate. I think he said to the half second versus the second.
Oliver, once again, I want to thank you for being on the program. The website, johntitor.com, is it user-friendly?
Oh, absolutely. We try to keep it user-friendly and update it, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. We enjoy it.
Okay, my friend. You take care of yourself, Oliver. Thanks for the full program, the update. Who knows? Maybe one day John Titor will contact you, and we can get both of you on the program.
That would be interesting. It's always a pleasure, George.
All right, my friend. Oliver Williams, he's the webmaster for johntitor.com, and that's spelled Titor.com.
My name is John Titor. I'm a time traveler from 2036. Titor is my pseudonym surname, which is an anagram for time traveler. I'm an only child, born in Florida in 1998. In my timeline, I live in Central Florida with my family. I'm a soldier, a major, currently stationed at an army base in Tampa. I'm on a government mission critical to my world. I don't expect anyone to believe me, and I'm not trying to convince anyone. But I wish people would consider the possibility of time travel. On your timeline, in April 27th, 1998, I knocked on the door of my parents' house and claimed to be their son from the future. Age 38, a time traveler from the year 2036. From that day until March 2001, I stayed with my family at their house before returning to my timeline. You may say that I was born about halfway into this cycle. It was named Gen X. Gen Xers would be about 40 to 50 years old in 2036. In my opinion, the Gen Xers ended up in two categories. There were ones who had learned to be independent from breaking away from tradition and society's expectations, and the others who had no idea how to take care of themselves and just wanted the trains to run on time. The ones in the first group feel very guilty about letting the worlds go to hell, and the ones in the second group are full dead. Life is not easy in my world. We are recovering from years of war, poison, destruction, and hate, all of which courtesy of the thinking and actions of people that live right now in the same world you do. I watch every day what you are doing as a society while you sit by and you watch your constitution being torn away from you. You willfully eat poisoned food by manufactured products no one needs and turn an uncaring eye away from millions of people suffering and dying all around you. Is this the universal law you subscribe to? I will let you all in on a little secret. No one likes you in the future. This time period is being looked at as being full of lazy, self-centered, civically ignorant sheep. The basics for time travel start at CERN in about a year and end in 2034 with the first time machine being built by GE. I made my jump into this world by using the CTO4 unit. It is also called Gravity Distortion Time Displacement Unit. The CTO4 unit uses a second as a unit of measurement of displacement in a system called VGL, Variable Gravity Lock, for the reorganization of the basic position. I estimate that there are approximately 10 units of this machine as mine and about 20 of another unit larger, the CTO6, which exploits a greater precision in the unit, about 0.5 seconds instead of the second. This means CTO6 could travel to a future half a second ahead of now. The main difference is the sensitivity and the number of the main cesium clocks. Long story short, the unit is based on the theory of parallel universes. They exist independently of each other and only interact to avoid collapse of wave function. For any given particle or event that you're looking at, I like to imagine it as a series of parallel lines crossed by a wavy line. Each point on a wavy line where a straight line crosses represents an alternative outcome. The multiple U's on each world line record a different result for the activity of the particle. Since all possibilities, outcomes, and events are occurring and exist simultaneously, it would mean that multiple universes out there where you are living a normal day behind and a day ahead of the you on this universe. The CTO4 unit is portable between vehicles. It is very heavy and requires a stiff suspension. A 1967 Chevrolet was chosen for my travels. The idea was to find a vehicle that would not draw too much attention for the time period of 1975. Unfortunately, there were not many suitable vehicles around in 2036. The first leg of my trip was from 2036 to 1975. I was sent to get the IBM computer system called the 5100. It was one of the first portable computers ever made, and it has the ability to read the older IBM programming languages in addition to APL and BASIC. We need the 5100 to debug various legacy computer programs in 2036. Unix has a problem in 2038. We'll have a timeout error, and many of the mainframe systems that ran a large part of the infrastructure were based on a very old IBM computer code. Time travelers are usually chosen for a particular mission based on their ability to gain the cooperation of someone related to the goal on the target world run. In my case, my grandfather was directly involved with the building and the programming of the IBM 5100 computer in Rochester, Minnesota. The ability to read the computer language was an accidental feature on the 5100 that was removed from any future desktop computers. In order to take advantage of this feature, my grandfather had it modified. The 5100 I have now required a couple of special tweaks that had to be done by one of the software engineers in 1975. Anyone who is familiar with this feature and was told to keep their mouth shut about it will be able to tell you what it is. In exchange for the 51 computer, my grandfather made me promise to travel to 1998 and help my parents prepare for Y2K, which was a disaster on my world line. Many people died on the highways, froze to death trying to get warmer weather. The government tried to keep power by instituting martial law, but all of it collapsed when their efforts to bring the power back up failed. When I arrived at my parents' home in 1998, I found my story quite amazing. I approached my father and was easily able to prove to him who I was. They are very aware of what I'm doing, why I'm here, and when I will be leaving. Shortly after arriving in 1998, I sold the 1967 Chevrolet as it attracted a great deal of attention. Perhaps that's why it was still around in 2036. I bought a 1987 four-wheel drive, which has a strong suspension system to handle the weight of the CT04 distortion unit. Every time I changed vehicles, I had to do a readjustment of the time machine. It's a function of the VGL system. It works as a gravity sensor system. So a gravity baseline is taken and rechecked every time the unit is used. A new vehicle would alter the gravity signature. While staying at my parents', I began posting with my father's computer or using alternate names and internet routes. Time travelers do not like to reveal themselves, but I wanted to interact with the people of this timeline to understand and collect information to bring back to 2036. Right now, in my world line, time travel is used to get information or items that would be helpful in getting a post-World War III world back to a normal condition. A nuclear world war in 2015 killed nearly 3 billion people. Many will perish as a result of starvation and disease. The war is a result of faulty politics and a desperation from Western leadership during the U.S. Civil War. But suppose that, even in this timeline, you could actually stop it. There is a civil war in the United States that starts in 2005. That conflict flares up and down for 10 years. In 2015, Russia launches a nuclear strike against major cities in the United States, China, and Europe. The United States counterattacks. The U.S. cities are destroyed along with the American Federal Empire. Thus we, in the country, won. The European Union and the Chinese were also destroyed. Russia is now our largest trading partner, and the capital of the U.S. was moved to Omaha, Nebraska. Nuclear war is a very undesirable thing, but it is not the end of the world. There are areas and cities we can't enter, and the environment did suffer a great deal of damage, but we are recovering. The EMPs took out a great number of electronic devices. That's one of the reasons why we don't have reliable technology laying around anymore. After the war, many things like manual printing machines, bicycles, sailboats, and hand tools were valued a great deal. There is a high-speed train system, horseback, bike, walking. Automobiles were used mostly for sport and some transportation. The internet is still alive and well in the future. People finally spend more talking because life is more centered on the community again. In 2036, a great deal of efforts is going into repairing the environment and infrastructure. Our real problem in the future is how to purify water. Water is a precious commodity, and I'm baffled that in your world you waste it every day. After the war, much of the prejudice you have now was swept away by simple necessity. People had to work and fight together just to survive. This has a way of opening a person's eyes to the value of fellow human beings. Yes, I believe in Jesus Christ, and we pray to God in churches. Religion has become far less centralized, though. Extremes tend to bring you closer to God, so I would characterize religion and spirituality as much more of a personal institution. I think that there is only one God. I also think that your soul may be a combination of all the collective thoughts and actions of the infinite yous. If that is true, it becomes difficult to define death until all world lines come to an end. Today is March 21st, 2001. I will be leaving this world line shortly, and this will be my final post. I have been paying a great deal of attention to your world line. My interaction with you was not a direct mission parameter, but it was a secondary mission protocol based on standing orders given to all temporal drivers. The secondary objective is basically to gather as much information about your world line based on the set of observational variables. When we first arrived, your world line met those conditions. What amazed me is why no one here wonders why Y2K didn't hit them at all. Have you ever considered that I might have already accidentally screwed up your world line? Bring a gas can with you when the car dies on the side of the road. Farewell, John.